If you think you know what bad luck really looks like, this is what happens when the person sharing your bed is quietly dismantling your life, and no one sees it, not even you. My name is Emily. I'm 37 years old, and I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment in Portland, Oregon. I've lived alone for about a year now, since everything happened. I'm not sure where to start. So I'll start where it was still good, or at least where it looked that way. My sister Megan and I grew up together in a small house in the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, nothing broken, just 2 girls sharing a room, sharing a bathroom, sharing everything the way sisters do when there's not quite enough space, but there's more than enough love. She was 5 years younger than me, my little shadow, the kid who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and then steal all the blankets and deny it in the morning. We were close in the way that people are close when they don't have to try. It was just there, natural, easy. Then our parents split up. I was 15, Megan was 10. My dad stayed in Columbus. My mom moved to Seattle, took Megan with her, said she needed a fresh start somewhere new. I understood, in theory. I was a teenager, I had school, I had friends, I had a life there, and I didn't want to uproot it. So I stayed with my dad, and just like that, we were split down the middle. At first it was okay. Phone calls every few days, visits during school breaks. My mom was good about keeping us connected. But then I went to college, and Megan started high school, and life just moved. Not away from each other exactly, but forward, separately. The calls got shorter, the visits got rarer. We were still sisters in all the ways that mattered on paper, birthdays, holidays, the occasional text. But somewhere in the space between 15 and 30, we had quietly become strangers. I graduated, got a job in marketing at a mid-sized tech company in Portland, built a life. I was good at my job. I liked it. I had a routine, an apartment I loved, a circle of friends that fit just right. And then I met Daniel. This was maybe 4 years ago. A mutual friend's birthday party, the kind where there's too many people and not enough places to sit, and the music is slightly too loud for actual conversation. Daniel was standing by the kitchen counter holding a beer he wasn't really drinking, and he made a joke about the playlist that was genuinely funny. Not just polite laugh funny. Actually funny. We talked for 3 hours. I barely noticed anyone else was there. He moved in after about 8 months. I want to be careful here, because when I tell this story now, after everything, it's tempting to make Daniel into a monster from the beginning, to look back and say, I should have seen it. The signs were there. But the truth is more uncomfortable than that. The truth is that Daniel was wonderful for a while. Warm, attentive, genuinely seemed to care. He remembered things, little things. He'd bring home the exact brand of oat milk I liked, even though he thought oat milk was unnecessary. He texted when he was running late. He asked about my coworkers by name. For about a year, I thought I had gotten it exactly right. And then things started to go sideways, slowly. So slowly I didn't even notice it happening. The first thing was my work laptop. I left it on the kitchen table one Thursday evening, went to the gym, came back and couldn't find it. Found it eventually behind the couch cushion. I figured I'd moved it and forgotten. Daniel said I was probably just tired, that I did stuff like that when I was stressed. I thought, yeah, okay, maybe. Then my calendar. I missed a meeting, an important one, with a client we'd been courting for months. I had it in my calendar. I know I did. But the morning of, there was nothing there. The event was gone. My manager was patient but visibly frustrated. I apologized, rescheduled, spent 2 days feeling like I was losing my mind. Then a project proposal I'd been working on for weeks. Gone. Not just moved, deleted. I had to reconstruct it from notes and memory, working until 2 a.m. When I submitted it, it was good, but it wasn't what it had been. And I knew it. Each of these things alone is explainable. A misplaced laptop, a calendar glitch, an accidental delete. But they kept happening, over and over. And every time I mentioned something going wrong, Daniel had the same energy. Calm, almost gentle, a little bit sorry for me. He'd say things like, "You've been really scattered lately," or "Maybe you need to cut back on your workload," or, this one I remember clearly, "I'm worried about you, honestly." I started to believe him. That's the thing. I started to believe that I was the problem. I got passed over for a promotion I had been working toward for 18 months. My manager pulled me into her office, closed the door, and told me there were concerns about my reliability. My reliability. I sat there and nodded and said, I understood, and then I walked to the bathroom and stood at the sink and gripped the edge of the counter and just breathed. My social life had quietly collapsed. My best friend Jess had texted me probably 15 times in 3 months, and I'd responded to maybe 4 of them. My college friends had stopped inviting me to things because I always canceled. I had let all of it slip away, and I hadn't even noticed until it was mostly gone. Daniel didn't like having people over. He got quiet when I made plans. Not angry. Daniel never got overtly angry. Just quiet in a particular way that made me feel guilty for wanting something that didn't involve him. So I stopped wanting it. By the time I'd been with Daniel for almost 3 years, I had a smaller life than I'd ever had. Smaller job prospects, smaller bank account, smaller circle. I was surviving. That was basically it. And then Megan called. It was a Tuesday night in late September. I was sitting on the bathroom floor, not for any particular reason, sometimes I just end up there, with my back against the tub, eating cereal because I hadn't felt like cooking. My phone lit up on the mat beside me. Megan. We had talked twice in the past year, once at Christmas, once when our dad had a minor health scare in the spring. Both times had been short, surface level, the kind of catch-up that doesn't really catch anything. I answered. Her voice was the same and completely different at the same time. Older, steadier. She got right to the point. She always had, even as a kid. She'd just accepted a job offer in Portland. Brand strategy, a good agency, a real opportunity. She was excited. She was also in a tight spot. The apartment she'd lined up had fallen through. The new one wasn't available for 6 weeks. And she was wondering if maybe, by any chance, she could stay with me. Just for a little while. She wouldn't be in the way. I sat there on the bathroom floor with my bowl of cereal and felt something open up in my chest that had been closed for a long time. I said yes before I even thought about it. I told Daniel over dinner, just like that. My sister needs a place to stay for a few weeks. She's moving here for work. I said yes. He went quiet for a moment, moved the food around on his plate. Then he said, "Sure, whatever works for you." But something flickered across his face that I noticed and then forgot about. I was good at forgetting things by then. Megan arrived on a Friday evening with 2 rolling suitcases and a tote bag full of books. When she walked through the door, I realized I had forgotten that we look slightly alike. Same jaw, same way of tilting our heads when we're listening. She looked at me for a second in the doorway, and then we both kind of laughed and hugged. And it was real in a way that surprised me. She set up in the second bedroom, apologized twice for taking up space, and then came and sat in the kitchen while I made tea. And it felt suddenly like no time had passed at all, like we were back in our childhood bedroom with the flashlight, whispering in the dark. Daniel said hello at dinner and then found reasons to be in other rooms. The first week was quiet. Megan was learning her new office, finding her bearings. She was up early, back by 7, polite and unobtrusive. She helped with dishes without being asked. She bought her own groceries but cooked extra and left it in the fridge with little sticky notes. Something started to shift. I don't know exactly when I first noticed it. But about 2 weeks after Megan arrived, I realized I hadn't lost anything in over a week. No misplaced keys, no calendar events disappearing, no mysterious files gone missing. I had made it through a full week of work without a single thing going wrong. My manager had even said something positive in our weekly check-in, that the report I'd submitted was solid, really solid. 3 weeks in, I got a message from our VP about a new initiative. She wanted to loop me in, me specifically. I sat at my desk and read that message 3 times. 4 weeks in, I had lunch with Jess for the first time in months. She looked at me like she was trying to figure out if something was different. She said I seemed more like myself. I didn't know what to say to that. I just said things had been better lately. They had been. And Daniel was not happy about it. It was subtle at first, little comments, that Megan was too opinionated, that she made the apartment feel crowded, that she had a way of always inserting herself into conversations. I let most of it go. Then one evening, he came into the kitchen while Megan and I were talking, really talking, the way we hadn't in years. And something about his expression stopped me. It was tight, controlled, like he was working hard to keep something from showing. Later that night, after Megan had gone to her room, he told me he was worried. He said he had noticed something. Between me and Megan, he said she was influencing me in ways he didn't think were healthy. He said he thought she had an agenda, that she was trying to push him out, that she'd always been competitive, that there was something going on that I wasn't seeing. He said she had been flirting with him. I looked at him, just looked at him. He said it so evenly, so calmly, like he was delivering a difficult truth out of genuine concern. And I felt something strange happen in my chest, a split almost. One part of me that had been trained, over 3 years, to believe him. And another part, something older, that knew my sister, that knew Megan had driven 14 hours across 2 states on no sleep when our dad was in the hospital, that knew she had texted me more times in the last 4 weeks than in the entire previous year, that knew her face when she laughed and the way she got quiet when something actually bothered her. I said I'd think about it. I did think about it. And the more I thought, the more something didn't add up. I started paying attention differently. I noticed that my laptop, which I now kept in my bag unless I was using it, had not developed any mysterious problems. I noticed that my calendar had not lost a single entry since I'd changed my password, something Megan had casually suggested one afternoon when I'd mentioned the previous year's issues. I noticed that the spare key I kept in the kitchen drawer was gone, had been gone, probably for months. I just hadn't checked. I went back through my bank statements, 2 years of them, and sitting there at the kitchen table with a highlighter, I found things I had never pieced together. Small transactions, recurring charges to services I didn't recognize, and 2 larger withdrawals from a joint account that Daniel and I had opened when we briefly shared expenses. An account I thought I'd closed, apparently hadn't. Apparently didn't fully understand the status of. I called my bank. A customer service rep walked me through the account history with a patience that felt almost sympathetic. The account had been accessed regularly, not by me. My hands were cold when I set my phone down. Cold and very steady, which is not how I expected to feel. I expected panic. Instead, I felt something clarify, like a picture coming into focus. I called my company's IT department the next morning and asked them to pull the access logs on my files for the past 2 years. I told them I had a concern about unauthorized access. The IT manager, a woman named Rosa, who had always seemed slightly overqualified for her job, went quiet on the phone for a moment when she looked at the logs. She asked me when Daniel worked from home. I told her he worked from home essentially all the time. He had a freelance consulting setup that had never quite materialized into actual clients. She said she'd email me the report. I didn't open it right away. I printed it and put it in my bag and took it to a coffee shop 3 blocks from my office and sat in the corner and read it slowly. Twice. And there it all was. Every deleted file, every altered document, every login from my home network at times when I was at the office. A clear, time-stamped record of 2 years of damage. I sat in that coffee shop for a long time. I had a second coffee I didn't really want. I watched people walk by outside. I thought about the version of me who had sat in a bathroom eating cereal, believing she was the unreliable one. That night I told Megan everything. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, and I laid it all out. The IT logs, the bank statements, the missing key, the things I had been too close to see. She listened without interrupting, with that particular stillness she had when something was serious. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said she had noticed something a few weeks earlier that she hadn't mentioned because she hadn't been sure what to do with it. She had come home early one afternoon and found Daniel going through her bag. She'd walked in, and he'd put it down too quickly and given some explanation about looking for a charger. She hadn't said anything, hadn't wanted to cause trouble, but she had been watching since then. She had also noticed that my car registration renewal had been moved from the car's glove compartment to a pile of papers near Daniel's desk, that there were 2 phones in a jacket pocket she'd accidentally grabbed from the hook, that he had been receiving a lot of calls he took outside on the balcony. We sat with all of it. Then Megan asked what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to be sure before I did anything. She said okay. She said to take the time I needed. She also said I should probably change all my passwords tonight. I did. Daniel noticed. He noticed immediately, which told me everything. That evening he was different in a way I hadn't seen before. Edgier, less controlled. He picked a fight over nothing, something about dishes, then he apologized, which was also unlike him. He kept looking at my laptop. The next few days felt like waiting for a storm I could already feel coming. On a Thursday morning, I was in the kitchen getting coffee when someone knocked on the front door. Not rang the bell, knocked. Firmly. I opened it. 2 police officers, plain clothes and a uniform. The one in plain clothes showed me a badge and said they were looking for Daniel Reeves, that a warrant had been issued for his arrest in connection with a drug trafficking investigation. They asked if he was home. I stood in the doorway, and I don't know how long it was before I could respond. My hand was on the doorframe, and I was holding it the way you hold something when you need to stay upright. I said yes, he was home. They asked me to step aside. I stepped aside. What followed was about 6 minutes that I replay sometimes without wanting to. The officers moved through the apartment quickly and professionally. I heard their voices, heard Daniel's voice, one sharp exchange, and then what sounded like a scuffle, and then the back door, the balcony door, slamming open. He ran. I didn't know until later the scale of what they were looking at. It wasn't a small thing. It was a long-running operation, distribution, significant quantities, money running through accounts and layers, the kind of thing that takes years to investigate and years to build. And Daniel had apparently been running pieces of it from my apartment, from my Wi-Fi, from my life. The police secured the apartment and asked me to stay. I sat on the couch with my arms folded around myself and answered their questions as clearly as I could. I told them everything I had found, the IT logs, the bank statements, the key. One of the detectives looked at me steadily while I talked and wrote everything down and said, calmly, that this was actually very helpful. Megan wasn't home. She was at work. I texted her, "Come home when you can." Something happened. She was there within 40 minutes. She walked in, took in the situation, the remaining officer, my face, the open laptop on the table where the detective had been taking notes, and she came and sat beside me without saying anything. Just sat close, our shoulders touching. That small thing. I almost couldn't hold it together for that small thing. It was 3 days later that Daniel came back. I don't know what he was thinking. Maybe he thought I would protect him. Maybe he thought he could talk his way through it. Maybe he wasn't thinking clearly. He showed up at 10 at night, rang the bell once, and then knocked hard. I looked through the peephole and saw him and felt something go cold and very focused. I did not open the door. He knocked again, said my name, said he just needed 5 minutes, that there were things I didn't understand, that he could explain everything if I would just let him in. Megan appeared at my side. She looked at me, and I looked at her. I said, through the door, that I was calling the police. He said louder now, that I owed him the chance to explain, that I didn't know what I thought I knew, that I was being manipulated. This last part was almost funny. It would have been funny if my heart wasn't pounding. I was already dialing. What happened next was fast. He tried the door handle. I had changed the locks 2 days earlier, something Megan had suggested before I'd thought of it myself. And when it didn't open, he made a sound I hadn't heard him make before. And then the door shuttered once, hard, like he'd hit it with his shoulder. Then somehow he got through. I don't know. Maybe the secondary lock wasn't fully caught. The door swung open and he was there in the frame, and he looked nothing like the Daniel I had lived with for 3 years. He looked scared and wild and nothing like the calm, measured person I had believed in. He came toward me. Megan moved. I had forgotten, in all the years we'd been apart, that Megan had done martial arts through most of high school and college. I didn't even know she had kept it up. But she stepped in front of me, clean, quick, no hesitation. And within seconds, she had Daniel's arm behind his back and his face against the wall. She was completely calm. She said very quietly that the police were on their way, that he should stop moving. He struggled for a moment. She held. I was on the phone with 911 watching my sister hold a man twice her size against the wall of my hallway, and I felt the strangest thing. Something that was almost like peace. The police arrived in 4 minutes. Daniel was arrested at the door of my apartment. The detective I had spoken to 3 days earlier was there. He looked at Megan with something like professional appreciation and said, "Good work." Megan just nodded like it was nothing. Then she turned to me and said, "Let's make some tea." In the months after, I learned things in pieces. Daniel had been operating as part of a mid-level distribution network for almost 5 years. The apartment, my apartment, had functioned as a coordination point of sorts, which was apparently part of why he'd been so invested in staying. The financial sabotage, the professional interference, a combination of control, and I think genuine fear that if I became too successful, too stable, I might look too closely at things. He had needed me small, had worked to keep me small. For years, I got my job back. I never technically lost it, but I got the version of the job I should have had. The title, the projects, the credibility I had been quietly hemorrhaging for 3 years. My manager knew what she knew from the IT investigation and didn't say much, just moved things forward. I appreciated that. I rebuilt things with Jess, slowly, awkwardly, honestly. She was more forgiving than I deserved. I told her what had been going on, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "I knew something was wrong. I wanted to say something. I didn't know how." I said, "I know. I didn't know how either." Megan's apartment came through eventually, a nice 1-bedroom, 20 minutes from me. She's been in it for almost 9 months now. We have dinner most Sundays. She is exactly as she always was, direct, a little funny, someone who says the real thing instead of the comfortable thing. I have my spare key, and she has one for my place. First time in 20 years that we've lived in the same city. I think about those years sometimes, the misplaced things, the deleted files, the promotions that didn't come, the way I learned to apologize for my own existence, And I think about how long I might have gone on like that, getting smaller and smaller if a phone call hadn't come on a Tuesday night in late September. One phone call, one yes. That's all it was. I still don't fully understand people who do what Daniel did. I've read about it, talked about it with a therapist I started seeing about 8 months ago. There are frameworks, explanations, clinical language for what it is, and I understand it intellectually. But what I understand in my body, in the way that actually matters, is this. There are people who will take the light out of you so slowly you don't notice the room getting dark. And there are people who will walk back into your life with 2 suitcases and a tote bag full of books and, without even meaning to, remind you what the light felt like. I was lucky. I had a sister.